So Fanita,
Yeah.
second try.
Yeah. Well, we don't know that.
Yeah, yeah, it's private, therefore
Yeah.
we can mention it. We would like to have a conversation about, as you said, famous last words, meaning famous last perspectives or insights after some work we did, and after maybe looking forward in your age of 98, nearly 99, and maybe some insights you got during the last month or last year concerning your life or maybe the end of your life.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Famous last words, of which I have none. But first of all, I'd love to see you on this trip. I did think the last one was the last time.
Yes.
And very probably this is the last time that we get together. I mean,
Could
after
be.
all, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
At any rate, I did not know this. I just thought you had your own reasons for coming. It turns out that you very, very kindly and lovingly thought that you might want to tape something about me or by me or for me.
Or from you.
From me. And that that this is why you're here. This is a private presentation.
Private tape, yeah.
Though I don't care what happens after my death, as long as it's not while I'm alive.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time you very kindly put all our material on internet. And by now, incidentally, I'm very happy that it's there as a legacy project. And thank you very much. You put in a great deal of work on this thing.
Thank you.
And we have a history, you will supplement that, about my having been rather ungrateful when you did it, because I thought it was a private conversation and it's all over the place. All right, we'll drop that and I'll respond to what you're saying now. One never knows one never knows about the future. Right now, I am still under the impact of our my Skype conversation with Jan Till, your son, which has impressed me very much, that this young man, who certainly has many, many interests, still felt that it was important to talk to me personally. Again, I did not know what he had in mind, but it turns out very, very sweetly that he wanted to thank me for having supported him, as he felt, about certain steps, directions he took in his life, specifically to take more graduate work or not, to college and so on. The point is that he made it his business to talk to me and give me these last words, really, which have shaken me quite a bit, and for which I'm very grateful. I have had people come back and tell me, oh, you helped me on this and that and the other. I even recently had a woman call me, she got my number, somebody even from before my TA days, and unfortunately I didn't even remember her. And I still believe that therapy, success in therapy, is always a coincidence. It's the flow of energy going between the two people. And to the extent that we get onto the same wavelength and somehow click, then the client will take whatever it is that he or she needs. In the instance of Jan, it's a very special experience, because I did not see him as a client. I saw him as your son, who made a big impact on me when he was 2 years old and when he was 15 years old, and we reminisced about that, and also later on indirectly when we talked about him. And so I'm very, very touched by his having felt that he wanted to make this contact with me and thank me. And perhaps that's one topic that has concerned me a lot, about the impact that people make on each other. And ultimately, yes, we talk about relationships, but very often there are coincidental impacts, certainly planned impacts in the therapy situation, but there are coincidental impacts which can be very important and can give something. In terms of what it is that you want, my thoughts nowadays, my preoccupations nowadays, partly stimulated by material I received from an old friend, Ali Ansari, who is a Sufi, not a practicing Sufi, Sufi the way I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
And the nephew of his Muslim aunt, Saru, who is a very influential and active TA person in India, but he is outside the TA scene. Well, while I'm on the subject of Ali, I'll say something about him. The two of us happen to have lived in the same compound for a period of 2 weeks, during which we interchanged a lot and influenced each other in very many different ways. And then I got back, we were there by coincidence. Somebody who hired him to do some workshops and hired me to do workshops, and we were thrust together, not out of choice. And again, coincidence made a big impact on each other. At the time, Ali was imbued with his Sufi issues, and he's a scientist, he's a physicist, but that was not what we talked about.
No.
And he was doing some very important volunteer sponsorship of a school for young children, orphaned children, and so on. That was more the point, the common denominator at the time.
As I know, he started to write a book.
Beg your pardon?
As I know, he started to write a book,
yes,
which in some ways using the Sufi philosophy or background for some personal reflections on the human being. Yeah?
Very good, thank you very much, that's exactly right. And we were almost out of touch, except greetings through his aunt, since the 80s or early 90s.
Okay.
Since then. There was an occasional email, how are you, I'm fine, that kind of thing. And when he heard that I am sick, probably a little bit like you at the death's door, anyway, at advanced, like you were thinking, not that you are. Sorry. He started sending me emails and asked for permission and sent me this book. Well, the beginning of frustration, the end of a glorious period of doing workshops, which went between 1981 and 2010. That's my, it started before because I was doing a lot of workshops in the United States. I'm referring to workshops in Europe.
Yeah, abroad, yeah.
I was doing a lot, and I had the institute in Philadelphia for the English thought. But the beginning of the period of my life that in many ways I enjoyed the most of all for my whole life. Well, that is very funny, because I had thrills about my children, their birth and their development, and the relationship with them, many. But all this was going on in the context of my not feeling fulfilled as a professional woman. I did not enjoy being an analyst. And I am going to refer to my life, but I will assume that anybody who's interested has read my biography, so I'm going off again. My biography was written in German by Sigrid Röhl, R-O-E-H-L. I felt very free dictating to Sigrid, dictating tapes and tapes and tapes, which she reorganized. I never believed that a book would come out of it. I just enjoyed doing it, and it was interspersed with workshops. So I was having my opportunity to talk about me while being very involved in the lives of many others. I think, to my surprise, the book came out, she finished the book, which I didn't think she would. It took 4 years. Then she found a publisher, which I didn't think she would. And then it came out in 2011. No,
it was earlier.
Earlier.
Not earlier.
2001, 2004.
Yeah,
She finished it in 2001, and it described my life up to 2001, which was up to a period when I was feeling very good and doing international workshops. And I was much freer dictating my book because it was in German rather than in English, because Deirdre would not be able to read it. And I thought that there would be parts that she would not...
still have your secrets,
Yeah.
against your daughter.
Yeah, again. But the book again, I now realize that the legacy project happened just like the book, that I didn't think it would be open. Well, the book, the fact that it came out in 2004, I was really upset because I still did have the psychoanalytic attitude that the analyst or the therapist's workshop is supposed to be very secret. And then the book was secret from Deirdre because she wouldn't be able to read it. Well, it went differently. It turned out that although I thought I would have to stop working, various people who came to my workshops did read it, and got a lot of enlightenment, in quotes, out of it. I realized as they talked about it and said, this happened to me just like you, or I felt just like you, things like that, and it never fit. And I realized that the value of the book was that people could project into it. And it was helpful in very strange ways.
Can work with it,
Yeah. So it did not stop my doing workshops, although there was a time when we had a real party that people still in Germany tease me about. It was organized and with lots of goodbyes around the time when the book came out. And then they reproached me for having continued. Okay, that's a joke. Anyway, now where was I?
That you enjoyed the time when you traveled around and had workshops abroad, and then in 2010 time changes, and
2010 was after I had already started having pains and realizing that physically I was not up to it. And so, although there was the IATA conference in 2010 in Prague, and that was a highlight for me. First of all, because Wayne and Deirdre came to that. You were there. Various other friends like Isabel Crespel were there. Marian Weisberg was there. So it was important. Dolores Bonari was there. It was important for me to feel already that these were my last workshops. Richard Erskine organized a round table with various people talking about their script approach, which mine being different from the standard script approach, and that's all in the professional literature. And then then this was followed by a book edited by Erskine, where he had articles, chapters, where everybody summarized their views on script. I was very pleased to find that that Erskine included very many different theories. For he and I have a different approach to script, but he was very generous about it. And so although I don't have a good record of those workshops I did, at least there is that chapter which summarizes my approach to script and demonstrates with one case which I used for other demonstrations.
And then you came back, and your career as traveling therapeutical genius gypsy was in some way over.
Yes. And of course I live at the Peninsula Regent, which is a residential treatment center. And I have been living here since 1990, since 2000.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am absolutely sure. It followed a burn, B-U-R-N, accident I had. And when I came to the Regent, I came with the intention of dying. And miraculously, I recovered a year later. I had been 2 months in the hospital, and I was 82 at the time, with no expectation of recovery. And that story of my recovering because of having been almost forced to resume my workshops in Europe was a wonderful recovery. So nowadays I tend to forget that I lived in this place all the time from 2000 to 2010 perfectly happily, because I just left my apartment. I didn't have to worry about anything. Went to England, came back, found everything. Previously, I used to travel to Europe and take 2 months either in Aruba or in San Diego or whatever. It was wonderful life. Although many people used to say to me, how can you stand it living in hotels from one place to the other? I did have my apartment in Philadelphia, in the house where I rented 2 other apartments, so that my little apartment, which was really a studio apartment, was there for me to return to and live from again. So in effect, I lived in hotels, luxury hotels.
Just like this one, Just like this one,
And this place is quite luxurious too. The point is that the years when I lived here and was traveling to Europe, I treated it like a hotel. I mean, essentially no contact with the people around me, and acted as though there were 10 other tenants, and that was that. Starting in 2010, I had to face the fact that, number one, I was ailing and I had extreme pains at various times. And number two, my career was over. And it was time for me now to see myself as somebody living here and connect with all the people here. They see themselves as a community. People enjoy having dinner with each other and communicating with each other. Unfortunately, I soon discovered that this place is a peninsula place. Peninsula for San Franciscans is a special area, completely different from San Francisco even and from Berkeley. And people have the majority of, there are couples here and widowed. Most of the people here are widowed women. Some are couples where they take care of each other in one way or another. The widowed people, women, the majority of them, if not all, are rich widows of husbands who worked themselves to death and since they died before, and left them some very good money. And they led what they considered a very good life of volunteering, but primarily they were mothers of children. That was their justification for.
Which was completely different to yours.
Yeah, but their justification for being frivolous. I never used this adjective before, but that's what I really mean. Frivolous, and although they are proud of some volunteer work that they did, and proud that most of them went to college, almost all of them, because that was the thing to do. As soon as they left college, or sometimes even before, they were married, and their job was to have children and household help and dress beautifully and find beautiful restaurants. And their conversations are comparable. And their conversations bring me back to a period of my life where I suffered a great deal, really. That's the period which is described in the biography, but the emphasis is not so much on suffering. That although that I was working different periods, I worked first as a social worker when we first came to Chicago. Then Ridge Farm was a very intense, professionally, I mean.
So you always had a different identity of your in your mind.
Yes.
Sometimes explicitly and sometimes more implicitly.
Yeah. But always not only earning my living, but being productive.
Yeah, to be a part of the working society in some way.
Yes. Yeah? Which means being productive and contributing somewhat in this work. Yeah. In a way, I mean, Morris was a very fascinating person and intellectual, and Morris contributed to my intellectual work, very, very intellectual life. So life with Morris was never boring, sometimes painful, but never boring.
Okay.
Never boring.
Okay.
And boring had been something I experienced and suffered from, boredom, all my childhood. It's hard to believe. So in that sense, I'll go back to in terms of identity, because what I'm talking about now is the various identities I went through in my life. I had a happy identity during the years 0 to 4 as my grandfather's little girl, parading in front of all the people who were coming to find favors, so that although I was an only child, I had no playmates. I was very happy. I could show off all over the place. This is what I relived when I did my workshops, by the way. Then I had a traumatic moment, though I didn't realize it was traumatic, when I lost my grandfather and my aunt, who was my substitute mother. By real, I said real, I meant that's what I really mean. The woman I experienced as my mother for all kinds of reasons described in the biography. And then this period between age 4 and 15 in Istanbul was this period where I was a very, very lonely child, first of all, overwhelmed by my mother, who had nothing to do and would have been happy to be a professional woman and had hoped to be educated by her husband, whereas my father wanted to be left alone and was a very withdrawn person. And again, my mother would have been a wonderful mother for me between the ages of 0 and 4, when she was always connected to me. But starting with age 4, well, she was a great mother when she sat me down and read to me, in French, by the way, the books that Les Malheurs de Sophie, I described that in the biography. And I hated listening to them. I enjoyed listening to the stories, and I identified with Sophie, who was also an only child, and had to be a very good child. And the end of the book, each book, it was a series, was that Sophie started a little adventure of her, or tried to have a creative idea, like cutting her eyelashes in order to help them grow. And then it always worked out badly, and being punished for it. So I used to enjoy the beginnings of the story and the way Sophie had ideas, and then hate the end, where always her own idea was a mistake.
Get wrong, yeah. Okay.
And she got punished for it.
Okay, but we had
All
Alain, we had Birger, we had Romanini, and I think Leonard Schlegel.
Very important. He had died that year. Because Leonard, I should talk about,
it's just running, yeah. And
are we talking?
Yeah, we are talking.
Oh, well, Schlegel was another thing that he taught. He did a very good book, introductory in TA in German, which is still very good, better than anything in English.
Yeah, that was the first one I ever read. That was the first one I ever read about TA.
Yeah, very good book. But and he wasn't a TA member.
No.
We had a lot of interaction, Schlegel. He never trained with me, but he liked some stuff. And anyway, he was in that picture. That was number 5. Did I?
That's number 4.
Austria, it was somebody, I've forgotten his name, but he was a very responsive student of Hauser.
Okay.
I was doing the workshops for Hauser in Austria, and this man was very responsive, and then I came once and he was dead.
Okay.
And
okay.
I've forgotten his name now.
So what did it mean to you when you have such kind of holograms of these 5 people?
So I suddenly saw them as the people whom I lost, as though I took it personally. Do you remember that in yourself? What is your memory about the talk I gave when I got the gold medal?
My memory is I didn't see the same people, as you know.
What did I say? I don't remember what I said.
I think I can't help you about the correct verbals, but it was clear. It was a very personal, short speech, and it was not something prepared, which you only read. I think, if I recall it correctly,
Yeah.
you even had some papers in the end, and in the end, I said, okay, no, I want to say something different. I prepared something, but
Yeah.
I want to say something different. And it was only a short message, as far as I
Yeah.
recall, but it's really coming what we say from the heart.
Yeah.
And that was. That's the only thing I can help you in that
Yeah,
point.
I got
And
into
you-
a trance.
yeah,
I mean,
and-
do you
yeah, and-
remember what I looked like?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I felt in a trance.
Yeah, that could be. Well, in some way, for me, I perceived you as emotionally touched,
Yeah,
deeply touched.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that could be related to a trance.
yeah,
Yeah, but you weren't upset, or you
Yeah.
weren't.
yeah,
You were just in the scene.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
connected with
Yeah.
each other,
Yeah.
with others, and with yourself.
I believe I did say something about, I now remember the people who died.
Yeah, that could be. That could be.
Without saying, I didn't say that, I'm sure I didn't say
Yeah,
that, because I
could
was
be.
absolutely amazed.
Mm.
And finding that they were different
Yeah, and-
countries was later, I
Yeah.
remembered that later.
Yeah, and good. Human memory is sometimes is a little
Yeah,
bit is a
right.
creative part of the work.
Right.
But it could be that you mentioned those who are died, and I think at that point you even mentioned David Kupfer.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, because he was very important for you, and
Yeah.
he was more or less unknown in the TA society because he didn't
by
wrote a lot.
everybody. He's
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
unknown now.
And I think you mentioned it. It could be because, as from all the conversations I know, he
Yeah.
was very, very important from your side.
Yeah.
And even in the last article you gave me,
Yeah.
he was mentioned. And maybe more in a summary, summarizing, you mentioned other people who already died.
Yes.
I don't believe that you mentioned these people personally.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't.
because
No, I didn't.
Maybe it
because,
was too personal,
and I'll
too
tell you,
intimate.
the fact that they were from 5 countries,
Yeah.
I realized only much later
Yeah.
that evening.
Oh.
I don't mean in,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that evening, that's
But all from
what
Europe.
was that? And then suddenly, yeah, all from Europe, nobody from. But now, since you mentioned David Kupfer, this is the comparison with David Kupfer is precisely how sad it is that people do not remember David Kupfer, who was a wonderful therapist and a fine person. And he had hoped to leave something behind. He had tapes and tapes and tapes, these old-fashioned tapes of his workshops, as I have tapes that are no good anymore, that are expired and so on.
Yeah.
And he certainly hoped to be his therapy. He was a genius as a therapist, and he didn't write. And I don't know whether David Kupfer was a kind of a model for me, because afterburn cured me of writing phobia, because I did not, my first piece of article was when I was 48 or 40, no more, 49 or 50 or something like that. And now you have 100 articles there in the books. I can't believe it.
It happens in some way. Yeah.
Because that was never my goal to write. Oh no, I'm sorry.
So,
It was my goal as a conscious goal as a
But-
child. I
but-
wanted to be a
but
journalist,
there
by
was
the way.
lots of constraints against it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but in that moment in Prague, in some way, did you feel more sad or feel more things which are accomplished in some way, or even lucky to have met these people, which all are male?
Well, no. At that moment I felt terribly sad that these people were
Are
not
not-
continuing.
But not continuing. Okay.
I mean,
Maybe as
that
some.
they were already dead.
Okay. So,
That there's no more hope that they will add anything.
Yeah, and that they will carry out the seed.
Yeah, that's right. That was the main thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I felt angry by
Okay.
some.
So
I
in
mean,
some way it was disrespectful from their side to die before you die.
That's right. That's right. Very narcissistic, if you will. I mean, I've been often
If you
accused.
say it that way, I take it that way, it could be. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, I've often been accused, by Deirdre especially. Not accused, she just mentioned it.
Yeah.
It's not fair. Of
It's no accusation, not necessary.
yeah. I mean, I probably am narcissist. I mean, an only child. That's the company I had was the mirror.
Yeah.
For running out of the
right.
castle
So
and
it's
pricked by the sexual symbolism was lost on me.
okay.
I mean, people often see that the symbolism about they
Mm.
find their partner.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas in my case, I got punished to be put to sleep.
Mm.
I wonder whether that's what I've been suffering from.
Mm.
My God.
Mm.
Because I saw it as being punished, put to sleep, and then the prince awakens her, but it's not clear whether she lives happily ever after he awakens her.
And she depends on the prince who awakened her.
To awaken her, which is what I did depend on Morris very much.
Yeah.
On his
Maybe, and
creativity.
he did this kind of job.
My creativity was totally asleep, and
Yeah.
I invested myself in Morris's creativity.
Mm.
And to this day, I used to say, I would say that if I had to choose one person on a lonely island to spend time with, it would have been Morris, because he always had something new to think about.
Okay.
And
That's a great idea.
you see, if you are creative that way, you have imagination, you can always figure out something new. If you are the way I was, and the way I before.
And at least on such kind of island, he couldn't make any depth anymore, huh?
What?
On such kind of island, he couldn't increase the depth anymore.
That's right.
Yeah, but that's it's a kind of confirmation that it was for you a right choice to be a couple for you both, I think. For a certain time. For a certain time, for a certain period, to get out of whatever it was at that time, and to develop yourself.
And the children we had.
Which are great children.
Which I consider fate was very lucky.
Yeah, that's right, I can imagine. Because that's my idea as well.
What?
That's the same idea I had when I saw Jan in the very, very first moment. Whenever I saw him, I thought, okay, that's fate. And we will stick together and we can enjoy everything.
Yes. So, 2010, I came back and I wasn't conscious yet of feeling sad or bad. I felt this is very good. I finished out. And I thought, well, I can continue a little bit. I started starting a little consultation group and this and that. I started seeing a few patients. But pretty soon, I think partly it got interspersed with so much pain. And then got interspersed the fact that I became very dependent on Deirdre and Wayne. And I became very dependent on them physically and psychologically. In fact, I mean, certainly physically very much Deirdre with the contacts with the doctors and this and that and the other, and Wayne also physically in the sense that helping me move or whatever, but especially taking over some of my daily problems. And which is great, which were weighing on me. So maybe I was lucky that at first I had so many problems and so much trouble, and I didn't have time to think about myself. I was just, I don't know, thinking about I have to worry about this and that and the other. And as time went on, after all, this is now 2015, almost 60 going on, yeah. Well, as time went on, I lost my grip, became more and more dependent and more psychologically dependent on them, that the only entertainment and the only interest in life was one or the other of them, even to the point of going with them with their friends, whom I find much more interesting than my holes. I don't have any friends, but so-called friends. I have so-called friends here.
So I'm not your friend.
Boring. And then I got to, so I became very upset about in seeing what I was doing with Deirdre and Wayne, who was almost a slip of the tongue, saying, Brian, well, in some ways, Wayne is a son, just as in some ways you are a son. This was Irene's diagnosis way back. I think she was right. I don't know.
Yeah, in some way, but in a different way, I would say.
Yeah, when we were working on the book together.
Yeah. And okay, in that point, I would say it was a bit different, because at the end, I took more responsibility about the book than you took. But in the other part of it was I had to deal with your wishes about what should be in the book and what not.
Yeah.
And I had to decide whether I would follow this kind of wishes or not.
Yeah.
And that could be a struggle between, let's say, an adult son and a writing mother, and in some way it was a kind part of emancipation, in that way.
And I was okay, and you have your own mother, after all. You have your own struggles with her.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would dare put that in here. That has to be cut out, or whatever. You decide. And going back to Deirdre and Wayne, I do feel guilty about leaning so much on them, because it reminds me about the period where my poor mother came to Philadelphia and was a big responsibility for me. And I struggled to try and find her something to do. She was full of energy. And I gave credit to my mother that she could not do the things I wanted her to do. She was happy when I allowed her to stay, when I did workshops in America, in Philadelphia, because a 101 introductory TA, because she could be in the back and just enjoy to see me talking. She didn't follow much. But then she loved the pauses, because people would ask her questions about me as a child, and she enjoyed telling them what a perfect child I was, which surprised them all.
And even you, maybe, a bit.
And that worked out very well, and she started sending out, she started helping me in a way that was helpful, because in those days you didn't have mailing services, and she would write envelopes. All my mailing was done by my mother, handwritten envelopes instead of printouts that, there were print, I could have print. And so she was very helpful, and she found her own volunteer job. I tried all kinds of, she worked in the pharmacy at the hospital.
Okay.
And in those days they didn't have the stamped pills. You had to count pills in little bottles. And my mother, that had been her wish as a young woman to become a pharmacist.
So at the
and
end
she
fulfilled that.
She was at age 80, in that sense. She loved doing that. And the young women who were in the pharmacy department, who hated doing that, thought she was wonderful. So they would take her out to lunch every day at work. And she went to work every day, mornings. She worked mornings for a period. Then she got into a bad period, but she was still very good.
Okay.
So my mother was there 10 years before she died. And the first 5 years were just, no, I'm sorry. She was fine in Philadelphia at 80 until she needed to go to the retirement community, which was very much a Quaker community, but very much like this one. And I like to talk about that with my mother and put that in as a memorial to my mother, because she was a very courageous woman and she managed. I mean, she was a pest for me. Well, she was an excellent mother too. I mean, in contrast to being neglected and so on. But in addition to that, I have to pay tribute to my mother, who adapted completely to the flight, to everything. She was happy to follow my directions, and she then married her Italian husband, and she came to a new city, New York, and she started cooking, which she had never done before, and cooked Italian dishes, and managed in her new marriage, while he was studying dentistry. I mean, he was a dentist in Italy. He had to take 2 years more again. And she was a loyal wife to him while he was doing that, and a loyal wife when he started his dental practice. And then when he died, I sort of put things in reverse. And she managed to not be too dependent on him. Then she had to go to the retirement community. And there also she was quite plucky. The first years she adapted very well, by contrast to my way. I am not did not adapt.
Okay.
She adapted beautifully with people there for 5 years. And then came the tragedy that she had cataract surgery at the hospital, and there was a misunderstanding. I had arranged for her to be kept there, and instead they put her on a bus going back, and there she was in front of the entrance to Penswood Village where she lived, and coming out of the bus, and I was standing there about to take the bus to go there to find her. So that was terrible, that she fell as she got out of the bus and hit her head in the back. And from then on, she lived for 5 years in the activity, in the assisted living, which I cannot, started forgetting the word. And that was terrible. She was out of it, and she should have died right away. And that's where then I started seeing myself acting just like my mother in regard to Deirdre and Wayne, and then just like my mother when I got worse. I mean, when I was well enough, I managed here and continued, and everything was fine. And then when I got worse, and managing both psychologically, not managing, I mean, decreasing the ability to manage psychologically in addition to physically. That's the point. Okay. Okay, so I got to feeling more and more really that it would be so much better if I were dead. So perhaps now, let me talk a little bit about feelings about the death business. I've had previous experiences, for instance in Sri Lanka years ago, where it looked as though I might die. We were in an accident situation, and earth was crumbling on top of us. And I remember having really thought about the fact that I would be dying, and I got to feel very much at peace with the idea of death. So now I started feeling this is what I want when I think about the future. I'm not afraid of death. I feel very good about death. And why isn't death coming to meet me and let me be gone?
Okay, maybe it's busy.
This is the point where I want to put in my little view about life and death. I see life I'm not a believer in God, and I see life, I used to see life more, the closest would be to the Buddhist view, but not in that there is any reincarnation. Science tells us now that there are many universes, not just one universe, and within each universe there are so many stars and constellations.
Probably it will be, yeah.
So we are, I'll use the word molecule, but it's or atom, it's infinitely more smaller than that. And I see human life as being like a wave in the ocean. And the beginning is coming out of the nothing, in the womb, out of the sperm and egg, and then growing, the wave goes up, up slowly to reach its peak. And I did experience being at the peak, big frog in a little pond, if you want, and enjoying it. And especially the last years of my workshops, I enjoyed it thoroughly. And then I want to say more about this business of enjoying being at the peak. And then, at a certain point, past the peak, 2010 for me, then the wave begins to go down, and I would like it to go down faster than it took to go up, much faster.
So you would like to force it, yeah?
Yeah. Well, not force it, but it does go actually. If you watch a wave does go a little bit faster when it's coming down than when it's going up.
Depends.
And finally the wave gets blended into the ocean. And then that's it. There are these less than minimal wave molecules, atoms, whatever we want to call them, that become a part of the universe. And this explains the fact that sometimes people have alleged memories of past experiences in 3 centuries ago or 10 centuries ago. There are these little scraps that seem to have some kind of memory from some other universe. It may be that every day there is some kind of a memory which we don't recognize as a memory because it's happened in another universe. So the dreamless sleep really represents that, experiencing lives in various ways, not consciously in terms in human life consciousness. And then once in a while there's a little spark that is reminiscent of whatever happened on this earth, and it may be any century, any country, and then again there's another spark from another century or another time. I feel comfortable, totally comfortable with this image of the after. I won't say afterlife, the after. Okay. So I got a little bit obsessive about wanting to be dead. And that got to be a little nuisance, I'm sure. I'm sure that Deirdre and Wayne got bored with my conversation at this point. At first it was a useful conversation because I was glad to get Deirdre to accept the idea that I would be dead. There was a short period where she resisted talking about the subject. It was almost the reverse of some people who say it's very difficult for mother to accept talking about death, and we don't know how to mention it to her. Well, in my case, I feel that it was a little bit of an effort to convince Deirdre that we can talk about death. And that I can convince her that I would be totally, totally comfortable about hastening death in every possible way. I do regret that we don't have the right laws in California, beyond even the law of physical suffering. I think that extreme emotional suffering or decision to want to be dead should be honored, really, with the help of doctors. I do fear pain. I do fear extreme pain. And I feel terribly, terribly sorry for people who go on and on and on with pain. Physical pain, which can't be alleviated in any way. Sometimes somewhat with drugs, but not really.
Okay.
Okay. I think in this respect, this kind of approach and this kind of philosophy helped me a lot about Brian's death, which was accidental. He drowned in the ocean, and he drowned painlessly. Perhaps there were a few moments where he was in panic and suffered emotionally, but I don't think he suffered physically. He did not. And I always felt, even shortly after his death, that he was better off having died, if he was going to drown, than knocked his head against a stone and gone on living in some kind of an invalid condition. Brian would have absolutely hated it. And then the other thing about Brian's death is that I believe he lived a very happy life. He was a difficult child to raise, and I used to groan about him very often. But he was fun, and he had fun, and his pranks, which got us so upset, were lots of fun for him. So I feel that it was okay. I wish he had lived beyond 31 years, but I do know or believe that his 31 years were happy ones.
Okay.
And so that is okay. And I don't believe I will ever encounter Brian again, or will I encounter
kind of
anybody else.
Yeah.
That's irrelevant. Okay.
So, therefore, you got in a certain phase where you wish to
Die.
die,
And
but
it became a little
fortunately
obsessive.
or unfortunately, you didn't die.
Yes. You're willing to put it that way, fortunately. And then I realized that I did realize that I was being a problem for Deirdre or anybody else, always repeating, oh, well, it would be better if I were dead, and then people don't know. When it's Deirdre, she's learned to manage her reactions. I don't know what they are, and I don't know how Brian Wayne's reactions really are. But certainly she must have gotten bored by these repeated
At least
assertions.
you had in mind that it could be, and that was a feeling you wouldn't like to initiate or by her or in her mind.
Well, my conversation certainly got boring.
For you or for Deidre?
I think for everybody.
Okay.
Anybody who was talking
So
to me.
maybe you're kind of almighty thinking, but
Well, I don't know, but it invites
yeah.
people's reaction to, well, no, you have a lot of lives
Yeah.
to lead, yet you have a lot of life in you, and no, and I mean, it invites a boring conversation, essentially. That gets to be boring, that subject. I mean, there's not much more to say than I wish I were dead. Even though I was proven a little bit wrong, because I wanted to have been dead at the time of the TA conference, which was in August of last year. And it happened to be in San Mateo.
Mm-hmm. San Francisco.
San Mateo, actually.
Even San Mateo. Oh.
Because it represented San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
The TA conferences are supposed to be in California every 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And other times it was in San Francisco at some hotel. This time it was in San Mateo,
Mm-hmm.
because it was a hotel that was convenient to the airport. Anyway, I dreaded that, and I dreaded the fact that I was getting emails from various people from Europe, or even Turkey, my friend from Turkey, saying, or from India, we're looking from Saru from India, there is lots of friends from India, and as I say, friends from Turkey, and all the other places, Europe, West Europe. We'll be in San Francisco at the time, and we hope to be able to see you. And I thought, oh God, that's going to be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not functioning. I don't like to be seen this way. I don't like to be visited. I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. It was obsessive also. Well, the time came around, and Lucy Friedman, I must give her credit for that, really organized something very well. She invited me to come just at the opening, and then if I wanted to for half a day at some other occasion. And what did happen was very touching, and this is my opportunity to thank those people who were in the audience, who happened to see this, that I was given a standing ovation when I got up on the podium in order to say hello. I was quite invalid already. I had to be supported by various people, but I could stand and lean on the podium, and it was very, very touching. We don't know whether it was a standing ovation for what I had done, or whether it was for my ability to be standing there at 90 plus years.
Might be
So
a combination.
I must say that I experienced it as though I were present at my own memorial,
Mm-hmm.
and had the satisfaction of attending my memorial, which I hope is going, whatever it is, it's for those who live, and has nothing to do with me, really.
It's interesting because that might be a dream for a lot of people, to see all their friends, family, and
at the memorial, to be there at the memorial in spirit.
That in some
And
way.
many people imagine that the spirit of the person is there at the
there.
memorial. I don't think that will be the case,
Mm.
but I did experience my
Okay.
memorial in this way.
Okay.
And after that, I said, okay, now I've had
It's
my
done.
memorial, I should be gone.
Yeah.
And now here I am, almost a year later, still talking. And something good happened to me quite recently, a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned him at the beginning of all this talk. It's Ali Ansari. So I got this, Ali, meanwhile, has written a book and sent me the draft of it very sweetly, with a reference by email, with a reference that I didn't have to reply, but here it was. And this book, reading into this, brought me right back to the 70s or 80s, early 80s. I can't remember exactly when, but approximately that, when we had these intense conversations about life and death, and Indian beliefs, Buddhist beliefs, Christian beliefs, and Sufi beliefs, which were his Jewish beliefs, Sufi beliefs, whatever, and talked about life and death. This book here summarizes for Ali, but I identified with it, all the questions that I would be asking about suffering, which is the theme of Hindu philosophy. In Hindu philosophy, I think, and Sufi too, they use the words suffering, but obviously what they're talking about is mental suffering and not physical suffering.
Ones,
And they claim, and actually can prove, that they can change, transform mental suffering into an attitude of letting go, of isolating oneself, essentially. These are all my translations. Ali does it much better. Allowing, insulating oneself really, and allowing whatever is. And all these statements about everything happens as it must, and everything happens as it does, and meditating on all that in various ways, and just letting everything go, and by dropping everything and insulating oneself. This is not the Hindu terminology, it's mine. One is free of suffering. And I can see how one can do that. I can imagine how I could do that. I can do that. Which brings me back to my own philosophy. I became aware of something I was aware of before, but not strongly, that the difference for me is whether one is contributing to life or just shuddering the responsibility of living the way people around me should lead it. They're just having fun or whatever, or experiencing their sadness, joys, and happiness, and
all
whatever.
the trivial stuff, yeah.
But on a trivial basis. I experienced that. And so I really also, theoretically, the part of me that's still the old TA person imagines that it would be good to write, which I can't do, about the fact that some people are oriented to more to present, some to past, and some to future. And of course, future can be defined in many ways. It could be the future of the earth, or the future of one's grandchildren, if one has them, or, yes, or one's own future. And to what extent one can contribute to it, to what extent one can be involved with it, and to what extent one can contribute with it. Which brings me back to why these last 20 years were so meaningful for me, because I could live quite well in the present, very well, when I was working, while I was working, while I was doing the workshop, and get a lot of satisfaction out of the energy that was coming to me. And then I could also live in the future with the pleasure of seeing people take some training from me or whatever, or some ideas, and carrying them on into the future, and also participating in the concern about what we're doing to the earth. That part I feel it, but I felt it and tried to be as economical of resources as possible. But for me, the future meant more what the next generations can benefit from, and how they can continue, even though I don't have grandchildren. It's all my trainees were my grandchildren, essentially. And even the clients, the patients who benefited and then could benefit other people.
And
yes.
how does it fit in your situation and now, in your philosophy?
Well, it as follows, that I think that the 70s, I was very involved in the 70s, but I dropped this interest. Oh, I say 70s, and it may have been early 80s actually. And Ali and I were very involved in talking about that. But both Ali and I saw the importance of being involved in the present on this earth. And did not discuss that. I remember the fact that but that was to be my feeling, that involving oneself in this Hindu, mysticism or Sufi or whatever mysticism, is really a rather selfish endeavor. It means I can isolate and insulate myself from mental suffering. Okay, but it's selfish. The guru who sits there is not being selfish in that he inspires other people. But he inspires other people to essentially being selfish. After Brian's death, I also got very involved in mystical stuff, and it got me no place. So these two very different trends, both the realization, I call it, that on this earth it's being very selfish to insulate yourself, unless you're a guru. Preaching selfishness is what I call it. Saying, okay, everything will happen as it happens, and I don't have any responsibility for anything. I do stay with the Western idea of responsible living, perhaps, rather than indifferent living. But now, getting myself transported into the early 80s, that part of it, or transported into the 2 weeks that Ali and I were exchanging ideas, I began to feel that, well, by now, that's the answer for me. To be selfish, to be totally selfish, not even in fantasies, not even in concern. That one thing I've been stopping, I was suffering also from reading the newspapers and reading about the horrors that are happening in this world. In a way, they're not different from horrors that happened in the past. The Crusades and ISIS are equivalent. ISIS was upsetting me, as it has upset many people. And also this feeling of impotence in seeing that the world is developing more in the direction of cruelty than contribution. And in that sense, I suppose, indifference, especially at my age, is justified. I can't do anything about it anyway. So perhaps now I do need this frame of reference. Beyond stop the world, I want to get out, which was how I was feeling. It's a slight switch in attitude, that what I now have as my little task, if you can call it that way, is to develop this ability of letting go, which is different than I want to be dead, I want to be dead. It's a slight switch, it's a slight that I will be able, I can't quite do it yet, but it was an insight just shortly before you came, Joachim. So I'm expressing it to you. I expressed a little bit to Deirdre by telephone. She was not in town. And I really need to, quote, work at it. Work means meditate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And translate work and into meditate. That's, I hope to be able to do it. Suddenly I've got a little future ahead of me.
Yeah.
To see to what extent I can let go. And let go, as they say, any one of them, let go of mental suffering.
Yeah.
What will happen when physical suffering comes back more strongly as the next cortisone shot stops wearing out? I do not know. I hate the idea of being just a yammering body.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah. But it seems that in some way you discovered a new human adventure for yourself.
If you can call it that. However, it reinforces the one that I had before, that I want to be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be a guru who inspires people to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the last thing. Maybe my example can be useful. And this tape that I'm doing now is really aimed at telling those people who care about me that I want them to understand that I don't know what I want.
Because that's already a part of the adventure, so that letting go.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessary to know what you want.
Yeah. I appreciate that you came here for 7 days. I was in great conflict about that, as you realized yourself. Maybe I should talk a little bit about how I felt. I became anxious, actually, that you didn't have enough stuff to occupy yourself with, away from me.
So that.
I was concerned that you had seen San Francisco before, and that there was nothing that you were dying to see here. Or dying is not the right word. Eager,
keen, or whatever. Yeah.
Eager to see. And again, I have visitors coming here, other visitors. I look forward to see. I'm still in the condition. I look forward to seeing them briefly, and not much. And I appreciate other people whom I'm still addressing, who say, well, I'll come and visit you. The intention, and it's okay if they want to come and visit me for half an hour or 10 minutes, and then leave me alone to my meditations and to my letting go and doing nothing.
What we talked at the end was about your tapes we made a few years ago.
Yes.
Which represent part of your past in a future you will never perceive, and because maybe it will even exist after your death.
Yeah. And we were talking about that before the tape expired, and even if it's repetitive, I want to repeat stuff that was there. First of all, really and truly, now I thank you profoundly for having forced me into, or pushed me, or done what I hated right after you did it. Yes, the word is okay.
Yes, I can't believe it.
And disappointed you because you thought it was such a wonderful surprise. But I was so unhappy that you put it on the internet that it was by Serbia now, because I was still in the now and I didn't want to be seen the way I was chatting. I wanted to be serious and, well, in Pasha, but teaching and not just chatting.
Talking, just like Just like a Fanita, yeah?
Yeah, like myself. And so I could not enthusiastically thank you, which you had hoped at the time, I imagine, or whatever you.
At least I thought it might be a great and nice surprise, and not a great and scary surprise.
That's right. So now is my opportunity to thank you really and seriously for having put me into the future.
Okay.
Forced me into the future, which I really wanted in those days too,
Okay.
and which I still want,
Yeah.
as far as whoever I was, to give me a future life in a way. This is the equivalent of being alive in the future.
Yeah, that's right.
And allow, and then especially when you added all the links and reviving a lot of stuff that I wrote before. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your trust that you already made this or tapes with me together.
Yeah.
And yes, I wouldn't have done it, or I wouldn't have tried to push you when I weren't interested in the material. And I think, because I think that there was a lot of stuff in, and therefore you pushed my passion to go forward, because that was one of the points that I didn't want only to serve you, but maybe to create a new kind of level of how to express yourself, and even a kind of, in particular, in a kind of conversation, because I'm completely convinced, even when you are selfish, you depend on conversation and interaction with others, even when you are in trencher.
That's right. Yeah. The energy that flows back and forth.
Yeah.
It gives me the ability to communicate.
Yeah. And that's the same
without
to me.
that, I can't do it.
And that's the same to me, and therefore I think it's the right media what we did. Yeah.
So let go of the one and only energy, regrets I have, which is that I did not manage to reconcile my theories about three drives, Servia, Pasha, and Transia, and the description of what happens to individuals through them, and some thoughts I have about people who live more in the past, the present, and the future. And they're different characters, they're different approaches to lives. They are perhaps different scripts even, I don't know. I would have wanted, I'm spinnen, as they say in German, I'm fantasize a little bit. That's the book I would have wanted to write, about reconciling that, and reconciling it through passages in life.
All right, okay.
And periods in life, and reconciling these three approaches with TA, which is very much of a here and now approach, into a package in a book that speaks both to people who have here and now problems and to people who are concerning themselves with a view of life and death and worth and value, the kinds of concerns that Ali talks about in his book, which has a lot to do with trying to reconcile scientific views, as they are now, with scientific with what? With idealistic, transia concepts of getting outside in mind, outside the world, and viewing it with the knowledge that there are so many universes. It changes perspective completely.
And maybe, as you talked about the wave, which represent the kind of our lives, and you said, okay, at the end, everything is going back into the ocean. So maybe your idea about the three motivators, drivers, are going back in the ocean, and you have to let it go that maybe others
Yeah.
will pick it up and,
That's
and,
right.
and will elaborate it in a different way, not in your sense,
Yeah.
but maybe in a different one. And that maybe is another letting go,
Yeah.
and even to without regret.
Okay. So this is a very good way to end, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is, I would say, reassuring to me,
Mhm.
because that's the level of anxiety that's still there.
Mhm.
So now I can get rid of that too. The
Okay.
one regret is no longer.
Okay.
It's there. It's there on tape for you to replay.
Okay.
Okay, a deep breath.
Yeah.
And this is my chance to say goodbye to those who see this tape.
Mhm.
And each one individually, you need to create whatever thanks you feel I would like to be giving you
Mhm.
for all you contributed to me, because we're not including those who are dead. Complicated thought. And I now say goodbye and thanks to the universe, and I will embark on my new project. Well, I'll admit that I hope that I die suddenly and fast. I can't let go of the fear of suffering physically. I cannot let go of
But
that.
that's still heading for the future and not staying in presence.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I thank you. You're being a good guru to me. All
I'm
right.
working on this.
So I am about to embark on letting go.
Okay.
Goodbye.
So, and to staying in present, I think it's now time to go for lunch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.